Hello once again, it's Matthew here from MatthewNorthMusic. Thank you for watching this video. Not a very long video this one today, but as ever, if you kind of like the videos I make, be them about music, electronics or whatnot, then please think about subscribing, hitting the little bell icon, sharing my videos on social media, and if you don't follow me on Spotify or Facebook, then please think about having a look. All the links are on my page. It's all MatthewNorthMusic. So today, it's all about this record, Hard Day's Night. Now, many would think it's a Beatles album that's not regarded in the same way as the latter day albums like, Abbey Road or The White Album or Sgt. Pepper. But this is 60 years old today, and there's kind of two versions of this album really, because you've got the classic album, which is the British Hard Day's Night that came out on this day, and then you've got the American version on the United Artists, which is more based around being the soundtrack to the film. And we're not really going to talk about this one because it's a completely different beast. But we're going to talk about this now. This record is 30 minutes and 30 seconds long. Well, that's how long it is if you put the CD in the CD player. So it's not the world's longest record, but it does have 7 tracks on side A and 6 tracks on side B. So you've got 13 tracks. But what makes this album so important is it's pretty much the first album made by a band where all of the songs are completely original. And for the Beatles, this is the only album that is entirely written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. There's no cover versions, and there's no George songs, and there's no Ringo songs. And, it's full of great tunes. Can't Buy Me Love, If I Fell, and I Love Her, Anytime at All, and of course the title track, A Hard Day's Night. And I didn't actually realise this fact until I watched a video that David Hepworth posted yesterday, I think it was, that it was the only time that an album with a title track, Hard Day's Night, got released as an album and as a single on the same day. I don't think that ever happened with the Beatles on any other release. And I don't think there's ever really been many bands who have released an album and had a single from the album with the same title and released it on the same day. I think it's pretty unusual, but that's definitely what happened on this day in 1964. But it's such an important record because in the 60s people just weren't making albums of their own music, not in the same way. I mean, you would get tracks on a record that were written by the band, but there would always be cover versions, and there would be other songs written by other writers, the sort of Tim Pan-Alley, Denmark Street type composers. And later on in the 60s, of course, you had things like Bob Dylan's Great White Wonder album, which went around the publishing houses, and various people covered Dylan songs that he hadn't yet released. So to have a record that was all completely original that early on was unusual. Wasn't so much unusual in the world of jazz because a lot of people wrote their own music, but even then you'd still get standards on jazz records. But 60 years old this album, and personally speaking, it's a weird thing, albums from this era, because I was born in 1972, and I always felt anything that was older than I was like really old. And I remember, I think I probably got my first copy of this album probably when I was about 22, 23. So at that point, when I was 23, that would be 1995. So this album then would have been, 31 years old. But it looks really old. It feels old. It's, it's like from a totally different decade. And if I think now, 31 years ago, Well, it's when the first Oasis singles came out, and it's when I think the first Elastica singles were out, and sort of it might have even been 30, yeah, been around about that sort of time. You know, Britpop was starting, Suede was starting, and these bands are all now still considered very current. I mean, Suede are on tour at the moment, and if I picked up a Suede record, it wouldn't feel old. It would just feel like, well, it's a Suede record, and it's the same distance of time. And now I look at the Hard Day's Night, and it still looks really, really old. But you know, that's just an age thing, I think. But I think it's also down to how the artwork was done and how things were manufactured and everything else. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there now. I just wanted to make the point, really, that you know, this is such an important album in the history of the Beatles, because this was a real stepping stone, and this is very much the height of Beatlemania, the mop tops, the screams and everything. This really was the peak, because then if you look at the Beatles' next album, Beatles for Sale, the cover's a lot more gloomy, and they're looking a bit more serious, and you know, the writing was started to get a little bit deeper. And then, you know, that obviously carried on into Rubber Soul, which was, you know, was a very, very songwritery record, really. But this album's brilliant, and I've listened to it a couple of times today, and yeah, this copy's even still got its original, you know, almost like greaseproof paper, feels like greaseproof paper inner sleeve on it. Anyway, so that's it, really. It's just a bit of waffle, really, from me. But if you've got a copy of this album, then why don't you dig it out and play it right now, because it's half an hour of pure pleasure that you will get. Anyway, thanks for watching.